Hi guys, this is Nick Polizzi from the Sacred Science, and I am here with my good friend Roman Hannes, who has been a big part of what we do at the Sacred Science behind the scenes. You met him in the movie The Sacred Science, and we just do a lot together in the spirit of bringing higher consciousness to a larger group of people. And tonight we're here to discuss Dreamwork. But before we get to that, Roman, how you doing, buddy?
Hi, Nick. I'm doing well. It's good to see you and good to connect to everyone who is here watching and are open to the practices and the views that the wisdom of the ancestors is connecting us with.
So this idea of Dreamwork was something that was actually pretty new to me. Even as recently as 3 or 4 months ago, I had never really worked intensely with my dreams, but in preparation for this talk tonight, you gave me a bit of homework, and I thought really it would just sort of be exactly that. It would just be some homework. I would just kind of get it out of the way to have, you know, the notes that I needed for you to work with tonight. But in the process of doing the homework, which was, you asked me, hey, from now on, when you wake up in the morning, keep a journal next to your bed and start writing down whatever dreams you have. And if you didn't have any dreams, just write that down. But just start making a point of waking up in the morning and writing your dreams down. And then once, we do the call, then I'll help you interpret them. I thought that was all that was going to do, was just kind of be a little running log of my dreams. But as I started to write them down, it was very, very interesting to me just how therapeutic and insightful that practice was. I started seeing patterns in my dreams that I didn't even know were there. I started kind of mentioning it to my friends and also to you, that there were some things that I didn't realize ever were a repeating pattern that clearly were kind of coming to me every other night, and locations and characters and people that I just never really thought were significant, that obviously are significant. And just the practice of writing them down made me remember more. So I'm in the middle. So I have just in preparing for this talk, I have been going through a little bit of transformation, I guess, for lack of a better word, but I'm sure we're gonna be doing even a lot more of that tonight. So I just wanted to say thank you in advance for all the insight I've already gotten from this practice, and I'm just looking forward to seeing where we go with it tonight.
Yeah, very much so. And the Dreamwork, although it seems new, it's actually a very ancient language that is still working through each of us when we are asleep at night. And just like in nature, there are patterns that we can recognize and see how the seasons change, how the trees are alive, how our organism functions. In the very much same way, the dreams are a communication of the organism, a communication of the greater meaning and purpose of each of our lives that the indigenous people have approached in a very similar way how we approach in our scientific empirical studies in recognition of the physics and mathematics and how the universe works. And in my own life, it has also been very essential. And I initially got into this work when I was dealing with the genetic incurable illness about 17 years ago, and have gotten some insights and recommendations to look into the psychosomatic healing, the psychosomatic approach to the resolution of disease. And the condition that I've had, although it was a very physical condition, but the triggers for it were considered to be psychosomatic. And so that initially brought me into transpersonal psychology, into the Jungian work, and even inspired me to such a degree that I first wanted to go into the Jungian school and become a transpersonal psychologist, and ended up studying a lot of that material for about 2 years or so. And then instead of doing that, I went and started living in the Amazonian rainforest. And in the Amazonian rainforest, it was quite a synchronicity that I started working with an Ashuar elder that was working with the dreams also in a very profound way. And there were many parallels that I could witness. And the Jungian foundation that I have studied with has greatly helped me to understand these cultures and to immerse more deeply into them, because these cultures, they work with this more ancient language and a way to see the world that is still coming through our dreams, which is the language of metaphors, the language of symbols, associations. It's a poetic language. The indigenous languages, they very much work in that way, like in Quechua, in the Andes where I'm right now, instead of saying thank you, they say a dove out of my heart. And so it's a language that is not just communicating through conceptual terms, but it's relating a certain state of being. It's relating this poetic imagery that takes the spirit into this direct experiential sense of what gratitude is, of what love is. And this is how humanity has communicated with among themselves from the beginningless times. So in ancient times, people didn't have the specific words that we utilize today. And so they would utilize imagery and would be able to communicate certain inner experiences and states of being in a way that was very coherent. And so one word could have several significances based on the context and based on the particular look that people had, or the certain feelings that were emanating from them at that time. And so, this is something that is very relevant in these cultures.
So how is it that you think we've lost this? I know this is a very long, potentially long answered question, but how have we moving away from these ways? Because like you said, for a while I thought Jung was like one of the first people to come up with this idea of dream work. But then as you delve into it, you see where his influences were. This is something that a lot of indigenous cultures have and still do look at as being a very important part of life. So how is it that we've stepped so far away from that in the modern world?
Yeah, it's quite fascinating, with the story of Carl Jung, where he himself have studied with many ancient cultures and then came into this approach that was very helpful and still is to many people today. And not only dealing with different psychosomatic conditions, but helpful in terms of understanding one's purpose in life, one's meaning, the direction of one's life, seeing that the personality that each one of us has essentially is just the tip of the iceberg. And there is a greater world within each of us that is having a big influence on our lives. And this is something that many indigenous people are still connected to and are in tune with, and it's the nature itself that is also present within one's organism, and at the same time is present within the connection with the earth and with the cycles, with growing food, making sure that the balance is maintained in natural settings. And so looking at the world today, you can start seeing how disconnected the modern society has become from that, where, if you ask, a general society member where milk comes from, they will tell you that it comes from a supermarket, right? And the same thing goes for the crops and the harvest, and really getting to know ways to work with it beyond the industrial, farming industry. And of course, that has to do also with the healing practices and with the modern medicine. So we can see this gradual separation in all aspects of people's lives. And based on my own research into this, and living with the indigenous societies, what I've been able to notice is that they have a very different way of looking at the world. They still live in this very non-logical, non-linear state of being, and are able to connect the inner dynamics, the inner qualities, the states of being to the outer expressions in the world. And actually that's how the language originated. If you look into the different words, the roots of those words in different cultures, you can see that the language originated based on the metaphors made with the outer circumstances. So in ancient times, when people would recognize a certain quality, like a bravery, they would say this person is brave like a lion.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Sometimes even certain words that have a particular sound to them. So in the word water, for example, comes from the Hindu-Germanic languages, and the way that it appears in German is Wasser, and the origin of it is just the sound of the water streaming, right? So it's Wasser, right? And so people were able to transmit certain living experiences to each other, something that was not just stagnant and framed in a box. It was a continuous living stream. And in ancient times, if you look into the different scriptures, into the legends and stories, you can see that when the ancestors would have a certain experience, when they would have a certain feeling or a state of being, they would actually relate to it through particular images. So when the people in ancient times experience a profound state of love, then they wouldn't just experience it in the body, they would sometimes actually see the angels descending from the sky. When the people in those ancient societies would experience some kind of lower frequencies of feelings and fear and anger, sometimes they would actually see little monsters and demons running around. And then from what I have seen in these ancient societies, initially the ancestors were able to have those experiences and relate them to the energetics within the organism. And then gradually started to separate from that, and then it has gotten to the point of superstition and excessive mysticism, where people would just see those kind of forms without remembering to connect them to the dynamics of energies and qualities within themselves. And of course, at a certain point in the development of the human society, there came a Renaissance age where the scientists came forth and challenged that old view that has gotten steeped in superstition by that point, and said, well, you know what, all of those things, they are just superstitions. They don't exist. And from now on, we're gonna just recognize what has been empirically proven. So only what we can see and touch is real. And so at that point, the humanity went to the other extreme. So leaving everything that is energetic and is not so tangible behind, and then only living in a material existence. And of course, nowadays, we are coming to the point where those realities are beginning to be breached once again, coming back to the view of those very ancient original ancestors. And so with the support of transpersonal psychology and quantum physics and all of those different things, we start to recognize that there is much more to this reality than a certain solid appearance. And then in that way, beginning to see that actually everything that the ancestors have described as the spirits and all kinds of entities does have some validity. It shouldn't be approached, very literally, but to really see how it involves all of those different energetics of the psyche, of the consciousness that we all share in, and how this world, in a way, does manifest as a collective dream, where we all dream this together, and this is also in line with many ancestral cultures and the views of them. And of course, it's more known through the Eastern traditions, but the indigenous people in the Amazon and in the Andes, they also maintain those views, recognizing how there is this greater organism of which each of us is a part of. And this organism is continuously communicating to all of its constituent parts, helping them to really come into a greater connection with this organism in a way that allows everything to thrive, everything to benefit. And so, in a way, everything that is happening in the world today is kind of a wake-up call. Mm-hmm. Recognizing that the more we become separate from this interconnectedness, more problems arise in the world as a communication to help us come back into wholeness.
So from your perspective, having done so much of this work, I don't want to oversimplify this, but what role do our dreams play in our own spiritual evolution? What is their purpose? Why, what is a dream and why do we experience it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And of course, there are different views into what dream is, and they all may be valid to a certain degree. For the indigenous people that I have worked with, the dreams are sometimes more important than everyday life. And they see that in a way where the messages that are coming through the dreams, the images that communicate something that is relating to the spark of life. Why am I alive? Why each of us is here beyond just the mundane wear and tear and the hamster wheel that we are all running in. And so in that way, that spark is essential, is more essential even than the daily responsibilities that each of us has. In a way, it provides a certain bird's eye view a higher perspective that makes an objective recognition how to go from day to day about our lives. And Carl Jung, working with these traditions, he has also come to recognize that the dreams are the royal path into the subconsciousness. All of those different undercurrents, all of those different dynamics and habitual patterns, the emotional upheavals, the certain motivation that each of us has living our lives, having a certain meaning, purpose, the willingness to move forward. All of those aspects are embedded in the dreams. And in a way, it's a language that many of us have forgotten. And it's a language that is not just communicated through the dream and the scenario of the dream and the story and the different people in it, but it's a language that is communicated through this energy of life that each one of us is experiencing continuously. And this energy of life is not something mystical. It's often too obvious for us to notice. It's the everyday emotions, feelings, states of being, inspirations, disempowerments, all of those different energies are fully embedded into who each one of us is. And I may think that I'm in control of my life, but then I wake up tomorrow and I don't want to do anything. And I don't know why. And I need to actually have certain responsibilities and tasks, but without actually bringing that to the core of my being and connecting that to the innermost essence of who I am and seeing how that is connected to all of the different facets of my life. You know, why do I do the things that I do? Why do I fulfill the responsibilities if not for the love that I experienced during that, for the inspiration, for the greater meaning that goes beyond just myself. It may be my child, it may be my relationships, my parents, it may be the friends that I have in my life, the community. But without those things, everything that I do would be empty and meaningless. And so in all of the different situations and people in our lives, there are deep symbolic meanings that relate directly to this essential vital force that we all share among each other. The more that that can be recognized, the greater the willingness and the meaning for life. And then the more benefit that each one of us can bring to the world around.
So in this work, and I think you sort of alluded to it a little bit, there's a lot of emphasis put on archetypes and symbols and how those can be things that show up in your dreams that maybe look like it would obviously be, oh, that's just my dad. Oh, he always does that. It's actually, in a lot of ways, it represents something much deeper. It's not just me playing something that happened, or just happening to have this dream about being in my high school again and a certain person being there. There's a way that those images and those, what you're experiencing in your dreams, is actually symbolic of something much deeper, and usually something that's representative of yourself, not the actual person or thing that you're seeing, which I think is what a lot of us tend to believe is like, oh, I dreamt about you last night, but in a lot of ways you really just dreamt about yourself, just a certain aspect of yourself. And we've spoken about that, but I thought it would be really helpful to everyone listening, just if you could explain that concept, the concept of archetypes and symbols, and just that idea of these encounters you have in your dreams, a lot of times really being aspects of yourself.
Mhm. Yeah, I can allude to that a little bit. For the indigenous people, that's very much how many of them, especially the elders, work with the dream language, where the dream language is communicated through certain images and symbols, and yet it's the essence underneath that. So, for example, in the many Amazonian and Andean societies, they live in this animistic spiritual perspective, where everything around us has a certain symbolic essence and meaning. And not just that, but the essence is symbolic because it is pointing to the truth within each of us. And so in that way, they recognize that the earth is alive, for example, that it's the Mother Earth, the Pachamama. And the earth is alive in a way that is relating to the inner life within us. The earth is a symbol of that unconditional love and support, where no matter how someone may treat the earth, she will continuously hold them and provide for them and support them. And so it's that unconditional love that is potentially inherent within all of us. And so then the more that each of us can open up to that universal mother archetype, the more each of us can recognize that within oneself. And for the indigenous people, they see that, it's also makes sense that for each of us to exist, there have to be the masculine and the feminine energies that come together. And of course, in the modern biology, we can also come to that conclusion. And so then in these societies, the sun represents the masculine energies, the father sun, and is symbolizing the bright light of consciousness that makes this unconditional love more and more apparent. So it's with the help of consciousness that each one of us can recognize the depth of the potential that the unconditional love is capable of. And so the indigenous societies, they live within those perspectives and then see how everyone have that certain quality and meaning, and how it's this greater organism, the universe, the super consciousness, the collective subconsciousness, God, however you wish to refer to that, how that greater organism is continuously communicating to the spark of consciousness within each of us. And so that communication comes through the images that we are familiar with, comes through the relationships and the qualities that we can recognize through those qualities and relationships. And so in that way, this language is specifically tailored to each one of us because of the life experience that each one of us has. And so in that way, Carl Jung, when he studied it, he came to a particular approach that is useful for our current modern society. And this approach is a bridge to that ancestral wisdom, something that for the indigenous people comes quite intuitively. For us, there has to be some discernment involved. And so that approach brings the understanding of archetypes. The archetypes are translated as archaic types, ancient symbols. The way that Jung referred to that is certain structures the building blocks of the universe that have existed long before this material existence. And this is something that is relating to the symbols. This is something that is relating to the patterns in nature. And so this is naturally brought through the human existence, and the experiences that we have today, they have deeper meanings to them. And so the archetypes, and I'll just relate to them briefly because that will help us with the dream work that we are about to do with you. But the archetypes, they bring forth the evolutionary journey of consciousness. Whether each one of us is able to see it or not, but within each of us, there is this evolution that is taking place. I think it's fair to say that everyone wants to be happy. And so this pursuit of happiness, while many people have different ideas what the pursuit of happiness entails, but the happiness itself is a state of being. It's something that is indescribable. Each one of us know it deep inside because each one of us has experienced it at a certain point in our lives. And the indigenous people refer to it as the experience of inseparation. It's this experience where I was not separate from the universe, where I was an integral part of it. And it is an experience that the indigenous people refer to the experience of the infant inside the mother's womb. It's this experience when the child is suspended in the amniotic fluid and is nourished, supported, provided for, is experiencing this bliss of deep restfulness, no worries, such deep restfulness that the growth and maturation of the organism is able to take place in a very profound way in a relatively short period of time. It's this regeneration. And we can see today as well in our neuropsychology and the modern medicine that the stress that puts us into this fight or flight situation is not enabling us to heal. And then when there is this parasympathetic nervous system functioning, the rest and digest, then the body is actually able to rest and heal and regenerate. For the indigenous people, the relaxation is not something random. The relaxation is a discipline, it's an art to experience this profound well-being on deeper and deeper levels, to connect to that state that each one of us has experienced once upon a time and is deeply longing for on a cellular level. And so each one of us is knowing about this potential of the body to experience this profound, glowing harmony and well-being, right? And then we try to, substitute it with spa treatments and, all kinds of different experiences and foods and pharmaceuticals and sex and relationship and material objects, but it never quite does it. And so the indigenous societies, they have looked upon it on a deeper level and recognized that each one of us is on this journey, the journey to return back to the source, but in a fully conscious and aware way, right? When we came from the womb as infants, the consciousness was just beginning to form. And then through inability to discern and understand, then a lot of inhibitions and conditioning and traumas have occurred that have become the separation walls from that original state. All of those different states of being that we are born with, that the indigenous people refer to as essential human qualities. You know, the child doesn't need to be explained what love is or who the mother is. The child doesn't need to be explained who a friend is. The child doesn't need to be explained how to smile. And so all of those qualities, the indigenous people, they refer to them as essential. And it's those qualities that sometimes in modern societies are looked down upon and judged and are considered to be negative sometimes even, or detrimental. And in that way, if I'm innocent and vulnerable, then that might be associated with naive, and someone might take advantage of me and manipulate and harm me. And so then, because of not knowing that those qualities are actually essential to life, and those qualities are the greatest strength that each one of us has. It's this greatest strength and the greatest weakness that relates to openness to the natural power of the universe. And so then that starts to be locked in. And then I cannot really express that to others. I have to protect that. And then at a certain point, that protection becomes my own jail, where I can no longer experience those original qualities myself, and then become closed and separated and put a front, a certain mask, an image to appear in the world. And then at a certain point, I might even forget that it's a front and think that this mask is who I am and there is nothing else. And so the archetypal language helps to bring relevance and remembrance into that original meaning for life. In some indigenous societies, this journey is related to as the hero's journey. So some people might have heard about it through the work of Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung and some of the native societies. And actually the hero's journey is not referred to as the hero's journey because it's romantic to see this hero on a journey, but because it may often seem impossible to come back into that original lasting happiness and not just jump from one instant gratification to another, completely exhausting oneself and never finding a lasting source of fulfillment. And so, you know, this is also one of the problems in the modern society today. There is lots of distraction, lots of sensational experiences, but a lack of profound value and meaning of human existence. And the approach in the archetypal language is the approach of the recognition of that essence in one's dreams, and how you have related to that. Each person in the dream, each individual, first and foremost, is bringing through some of those qualities on the hero's journey, is bringing through a certain direction, guidance to come back into that greater whole. It's interesting how in many ancient societies, there is this basic view that one is part of the greater whole. In the Native American, Northern Native American tradition, the Lakota people, they say, Ome takuye oyase, all my relations. In the Mayan tradition is Inlake Shalakin, I'm you and you are me. In the Quechua and the South American tradition, it's Halpayay Kusunchis. We all share the same life force. We all share the highest. Half of me is half of you. So we can see that in Eastern traditions as well, where In India is the Namaste, the divine within me, honors the divine within you. In Tibet, Omani Pamahung, love and compassion to all sentient beings. We can see this approach, and Carl Jung, the father of transpersonal psychology, he actually came to the same conclusion based on the study of human nature. So he saw that the personality that each one of us has is a result of all the experiences and all the people that we have ever met in our lives. And so if I have a grudge towards someone, if I have some kind of unresolved issue, then actually I'm not able to bring through this quality that that person represents in a fully conscious way. And then that quality works with the life energy that becomes distorted, and then me having a grudge with someone is actually more detrimental for me than for that someone.
Mm-hmm.
And so the archetypal language is the language of that meaning, is the language of the wholeness, of the heart, of the openness. And so the more that each one of us can immerse in that language and begin to understand that, the more human each one of us can become, and the better the world can be. More patience, tolerance, understanding, relatedness, and compassion, kindness, each one of us can have, right? So it's a language of that greater wholeness. It's the language of that inherent unity of diversity that is so essential in the world today. Yes, go ahead.
So I mean, so it sounds to me like, just to boil it down into like layman's terms for myself, really, is it's almost like your dreams are a breadcrumb trail for you to use to get back to that essential state of being. Like, there's almost, you're walking through your life, you're experiencing, I mean, everyone experiences trauma. It's impossible to go through life and not have things that rattle you and could potentially halt you on your path and create these walls of separation. And your dreams are almost, at least the way I am starting to realize them, just in starting to pay attention to them, and also through your words, is it feels as though it's your body's own mechanism, it's your soul's own mechanism to sort of leave you sort of little cairns or buoys or breadcrumbs to kind of navigate back to where you need to be or where you came from.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an evolutionary blueprint. I can wander through the labyrinth of my mind and conditioning in life and not find that bird's eye view, that more objective insight, and this language that can be experienced, can be perceived as something that is real beyond the shadow of a doubt, something that is directly relating to the circumstances of my life, certain thresholds of development and appearance of coping mechanisms, defenses, and all the different unconscious habitual patterns that came from not knowing any better, and then seeing how all of those situations are actually opportunities to come back into the source in a fully conscious way. And so in that way, it's an evolutionary blueprint, and it's a blueprint that one has to learn how to read, how to connect with. And at the same time, it's a life process. It's not something that is stagnant. It continuously streaming together with the consciousness from moment to moment.
So I think that people who are watching right now are wondering how they're going to begin working with their dreams and where the first stepping stone might be. And tonight's format is going to be you working with the dreams that I've been writing down, so they can get an idea of what this work looks like. Is that sort of the way that you want this to unfold? So they can get a taste and then sort of.
Yeah, first just want to introduce some of the basic archetypes that allow this language to be navigated. And so I'll take a moment and just introduce those archetypes. And the archetypes are very basic and are related to the human existence. So the first archetype that I can introduce to, I've already introduced it briefly, is the mother archetype. And it's the feminine, that original feminine energy. And the original feminine energy, more than just the feminine appearance or the shape, then it has to do with the spaciousness of the heart. It has to do with that willingness to bring life forth and go through all the challenges on the way towards that. Sometimes even seemingly impossible, right? I've seen my wife go through the birth, and yeah, it comes a point where it seems impossible, and then there is this greater purpose that just allows the greater strength and vitality that is not personal to come through from the universe. And the mother archetype is relating to the ocean of the subconsciousness from which the spark of life comes from. And this ocean of the subconsciousness, in a way, has to do with this just unconditionally open heart. And then from that subconsciousness, then life can come through. And for that, for life to come through, of course, there has to be this father-son, right? It's this kind of primordial soup, and the photosynthesis, and we can relate to the Darwinian theory that is somewhat relevant. And so then this light of consciousness has to do with the father archetype. And the father archetype relates to the consciousness that is uniting with the subconsciousness. It has to do with that consciousness that is uniting with love. Just love in itself is not capable of bringing life forth, but it's the love and consciousness coming together that allows the life to manifest. And those first two archetypes is something that we can see in many ancient cultures that is related to. And then, of course, from that connection, then life begins to manifest. And the life that starts to manifest, for the sake of reference, we can relate to it as an island or series of islands. And this certain stability within this ocean, this steady ground for life to start rooting into. And so through that union, then the child archetype emerging. And so again, going back into those initial archetypes, so the feminine energy, beyond just the appearance of the feminine, relates to qualities. And so those are the qualities of love, receptivity, intuition, creativity, tenderness, nurture, right? Those are some of the qualities that relate to that feminine energy. And then the masculine energy then relates to discernment, the mental activity, relates to bravery, grounding, relates to stability, activity, right? The travel. So we can start seeing how it's more than just the image itself, but it's really connecting to those qualities that are inherent within each one of us. And so then when those qualities are in balance, they are balanced with each other, then the child can be healthy. And the healthy child then is also a symbol, an archetype of the qualities that relate to innocence and the freshness, the aliveness, the exploration, the willingness to make mistakes and learn from them and move forward, and knowing that there will be this support from the parents that will allow the evolution to go forth, right? And so the child is the embodiment of evolution. And those are the main three archetypes that we can see everywhere in nature. And especially in this human existence that allows consciousness to become conscious of itself, that allows us to actually return to that source in a fully conscious way and embody it in a way that nature is gearing towards. So then from there, when the child starts evolving, initially the child is living in this greater parental unit and is being supported, and the decisions are made for the child. But then at a certain point, as the child continues to evolve, the child comes to face those energies that are universal. The child comes to face the energies that relate to survival, that relate to the instinctual energy, that relate to the energy of self-actualization. And initially those energies may be intimidating. And the child may start having dreams of monsters under the bed. And those monsters, they represent the shadow archetype. And the shadow archetype is very essential in this work because the shadow represents the facets of the greater self that are not integrated fully. In order for the child to actually come into the full expression of the inherent potential, then yeah, there have to be those falls, there have to be those mistakes, and then the willingness to learn from them and integrate a more objective perspective in one's life. And so then facing the shadow archetype, facing the shadow that is beyond this comfortable, safe nest of the parental unit, then the child needs to, in a ways, that impulse of life, that libido, how it's referred in psychology. So the child needs to move forward and then learn how to deal with that. And how can the child do that? Is by seeing how other people are dealing with that. Right? And so then we come to the friend archetype. So then, who are our friends, the real friends, the friends that have come through in difficult moments, the friends that have been able to share something that is very touching, very meaningful and significant. And so then we can start recognizing in friends of our lives we can start seeing the special qualities and characteristics that we resonate with, that we really like them for. And the friend archetype represents those qualities that are not embodied fully in oneself, that one is encouraged by. So certain qualities, characteristics that I still haven't unraveled fully. And the friend may represent those qualities in a more experienced way, in a higher potential of that quality. And so then the friend is also essential, right? How to deal with those shadows, how to deal with those challenges and difficulties. And then to go back a step and to relate to that, friend and shadow, because that also manifests through the parenthood. And so in transpersonal psychology, there's the universal mother archetype, and then there's the witch mother archetype. And the witch mother archetype represents the conditioning that gives, that is coupled with the conditioned ego. And the warlock kind of father archetype is represented by the conditioned ego, is the dictator, is this, capricious master that doesn't care about anything or anyone, just not even about one's own organism, and is just wanting to live in instant gratification. And so it's good to really look at that as well, right? It's the conditioning, the certain story, the particular circumstances of one's life that have became an excuse not to evolve, that have become an excuse to dwell in self-pity and self-importance, to contract and close in and not maintain the open heart in the challenging world that is surrounding us. And so that also is essential. In the ego in itself is not bad. It's not about destroying the ego. The ego is an essential part of the greater whole. It's not the most important part, but it has its place. And the ego, without the ego, it's not possible to talk or walk or eat, do basic functions. But when the ego becomes more important than everything else, then it's a problem. Then it's a conditioned ego. And so the process also has to do with that transformation from a capricious master to a humble servant of the greater self. And of course, the capricious master is never satisfied, no matter what happens. But the humble servant that is inspired to be in service, that sees this greater purpose, then that's very fulfilling. And so now that's also part of that process of transformation. And there has to be also a period of time within that conditioning. In a way, it's kind of like that egg that allows the bird to mature within it. And then at a certain point, the conditioning is not needed. So everything has its place and purpose. Then from there, as the consciousness continues to mature farther and farther, then coming to the soul guide, the lover archetype. In psychology, they refer to it as anima or animus. But for the sake of reference, I find it helpful to just refer to it as a soul guide or a lover archetype. And the lover archetype represents that suppressed part of oneself. So maybe I grew up in society that did not allow me to develop certain masculine qualities or certain feminine qualities. And then the lover archetype will represent those qualities, something that I have not been able to develop within myself, and then I meet it on the outside as a mirror for that inner potential that I can recognize. And the lover archetype, in a way, it's a deeper expression of the friend archetype. And, you know, in a loving relationship, in a loving partnership, the um, the lover is able to bring great inspiration to one's life and also press all the buttons in a way that no one else can. Right? So it's that deep friend who can point to all of my shortcomings in a way that I will not allow anyone else to. And it's also someone who can really show me the positive qualities and the potential in a way that no one else can. And so the lover archetype is a soul guide because the lover is pointing to the soul. And in Jungian psychology, Jung referred to the fairy tales, for example, as this collective dreams of humanity, certain blueprints that show how those archetypes are working together. And in fairy tales, we can see how the lover archetype, the soul guide, often appears in very difficult rites of passage and circumstances. Like, you know, the hero has to slay the dragon to rescue the princess. You know, the princess has to work in iron shoes all over the world and look for the pieces of the hero and put them back together. And those kind of dynamics, they show that, yeah, it's this expression of the soul that one really needs to face all the shadows in order to come into that divine union with. And in the hero's journey, the underworld, right, going into the underworld is an essential part. Facing all of the shadows, all of the fears, in order to really bring the light of consciousness into fruition and reunite fully with the meaning and purpose of one's life, the deepest meaning. And if there was no darkness, then I wouldn't appreciate the light. Mm-hmm. And so then the soul guide also comes through in dreams to show something significant. Sometimes the soul guide comes to bring forth a message of a resolution, a certain divine union, and the completion of a rite of passage. And sometimes comes through to point out to something that really needs to be faced. Some kind of dragon of one's own ignorance or disturbance or affliction that needs to be recognized. Then from there we go into the wise old man or a woman archetype. And the wise old man or a woman, it's a next evolutionary stage. It's an evolution of the soul guide. In a way, it's a purpose of life that is greater than just completing oneself. Yeah, I have to really come into the divine union, bring those opposites in me into wholeness. But then how do I utilize that wholeness in order to be of benefit to the greater whole? So it's not just about me making sense and figuring out myself, but then how do I figure myself out and then be of benefit to everyone, to the world. And so the wise old man or a woman, they bring through that archetype, you know, of Gandalf, or you know, the what's that other one, the wizard, in the Arthur and the and the sword.
Oh, yeah, Merlin.
Merlin. In Native American tradition is the white calf woman, right? That gave in the northern Native American that gave the wisdom to the first people. There are many different examples of that, or the fairy godmother, right? And Cinderella. So we can see examples of that wise old man or wise old woman, and the wise old man or woman represent this whole cycle of life. Is this greater perspective? Well, yeah, there is a time when it's important to do all kinds of different tasks and really come to that inner fulfillment, but then there is a greater meaning than that. There is a transcendental meaning. There is a higher purpose, just beyond just this physical material existence, beyond this body. And the wise old man or woman bring that through. And so sometimes the wise old man or woman, they can share a certain task with the hero. They can send them on a certain mission. And in the beginning, it might be a mission to go and rescue the princess. But then later on, then there will be that purpose of actually being in service to the people and supporting the people of the land. Or it may be a purpose that has to do with resolving the certain apocalypse in the universe or something like that, right? Or sometimes it may be just living a very simple and humble life, and then through that actually bring the greatest contribution. And so then beyond that, another essential archetype is the trickster archetype. And actually the wise old man or woman sometimes manifest as a trickster. And the trickster is an archetype that tests the hero and to see whether the hero is truly ready for the next evolutionary stage, or one has to go back and really work some things through. And so, in Irish tradition is the leprechauns, right? The tricksters. In Native American tradition in the north, it's the coyote, the heyoka. In the Amazonian tradition is the tuyachaki, that gets you lost in the forest. And the trickster tests whether there is readiness. In all the old royal courts, there was always this fool that was present near the king. And the fool was allowed to do things that other people would get their head cut off for. Right? The fool, he could, just laugh at the king and curse and, do all kinds of, obscene gestures, and nobody would do anything to them. And the original reason for that was because the fool was acting as the trickster archetype to keep reminding people what nobility truly means and how not to go back to the previous stage of development. And then, of course, gradually it has gotten forgotten to the point where today the president is the fool, right? And so this is part of that dreaming language that the humanity has been forgetting about. And then finally, to mention briefly the mandala archetype. So the mandala is the circle, and this also appears through all cultures on earth and appears as a symbol of wholeness, a symbol of completion. And interestingly enough, the mandala often comes in dreams as a compensating symbol, something that appears during the time when there is a disbalance, when one is not whole, and then suddenly all kinds of circles appear. Often those circles appear as the tires of the car, or maybe a plate that is round, or a pizza, and things like that. And often the circle comes as a compensating archetype to remember, I'm sick, I have to get back into wholeness, into the circle of life, the interconnectedness. And then sometimes the mandala archetype really appears as indigenous weavings and those beautiful mandalas that the Tibetan monks are creating. And then in those cases, then there is a deeper meaning to that, that the wholeness is coming forth. Finally, the final archetype that I'll mention right now, or maybe almost final, but it's the self. The self is you who is not seen in the dream, right? It's me who is going through all of the different situations and scenarios, and I cannot see myself. I see everyone else, but I'm going through it. That's the self archetype. The animals also come through the dreams, and they symbolize certain impulses, that animal nature within us, the connection to that animalistic nature, the impulse, the effort, the force, the determination that bridges the animal and God within all of us together. And so those are the relative archetypes that I can mention that help to navigate the journey. And it's important to understand that it's not a dream dictionary. It's not like that's how it's always going to be. It has to be based on the context of the dream. And as you mentioned in the beginning, the reason that we brought through the series of the dreams, the recognition of the patterns of the dreams, is because that context really comes true when we see the patterns, when we can see several dreams, one after another, and then recognize the same message that is coming through many different scenarios, to the point where that message is unquestionable. Where that message can be recognized and then worked with and applied to one's life. So this is a small general introduction. I tried to keep it succinct. Hopefully I have been relatively successful. And so from here we can go into the dream itself.
That sounds great. Yeah, I was just going to say that at first it seemed like not all of those archetypes would be necessarily represented in everyone's dream, but I think that just in recording the ones that I've had in the last few months, I feel like they're almost all there in some way. It's really interesting how we all have these ways of relating to ourselves, and these symbols that are just almost like these agreed upon symbols for these deeper meanings and these deeper characteristics.
Yeah, very much so. There is this Russian sci-fi story that long time ago I found very relating to the subject, and then there's been an American movie made based on it called Solaris. And this movie Solaris is about this group of astronauts that arrive at a distant planet, and the planet has an ocean that is conscious, and the ocean starts to communicate to those people in the symbols that they're familiar with, and starts to bring through the different people that they have lost in their lives and the traumas that they have had in relation to them. And those symbols, they keep appearing. Those in that movie, they come through in a very real way. Suddenly, his wife that passed away, she suddenly is next to him, and then those people, they keep coming back over and over and over again, and especially those that they have experienced trauma with, until the evolutionary message can be received. And it's the way that the ocean is communicating. And it's very relevant to the dream language, to the language of the subconsciousness, that keeps bringing certain situations in our lives that are patterning that original event until the lesson can be learned and evolution can move forward. So it's very fascinating.
So we're going to go through these dreams of mine. What, for people who are watching, what would you recommend they be thinking about or be doing while we're going through and analyzing my dreams? Because obviously people would like to start working on their own dreams at some point. Is it really just to witness, how you work through these dreams and sort of the general approach to understanding the deeper meaning of what's going on in your psyche and what's being shown to you at nighttime?
It's definitely not just watching some kind of an external process.
Mm-hmm.
So the dreams and how I work with it in our Paititi Institute and how it's approached in the indigenous societies and in transpersonal psychology is very relevant to each individual that is listening. And to see how, even though each one of us has a different scenario and qualities come through the particular people that I may know, but the qualities themselves are the same. They are universal. They are shared. Each one of us is experiencing the same threshold of evolution. Each one of us has come from the early childhood, from that original innocence and through the grinder of conditioned society. And so each one of us can relate to that. So in that way, actually listening to the dreams that I'll be doing with you, and you'll be our hamster,
Guinea pig. Hamster sounds even more demeaning than guinea pig.
But it's the hamster within each of us, right? It's the hamster in a wheel. And so then people that I work with and the indigenous people I learned from approach this in a way where it's all relevant to everyone. And then recognizing that actually, in the essence, we are not so different from each other. And the structure of the human psyche, the development, the lessons that can be learned, we all support each other through that. Hence those sayings in indigenous cultures that we all share the same life force. You are me and I am you. And so then just listening to the dream work can help bring very powerful insights and resolutions into many people's lives. So in that way, it is very helpful, and we do those kind of sessions often in big groups, and then people are often very engaged in this process.
That makes sense. I've heard something, a term called borrowing benefits. That's used in like the world of energy healing a lot, where if you're there witnessing somebody else's transformation, a lot of times that transformation brings up things in you, and you work through things just being there as a witness and experiencing that person's dark night of the soul that brings up your own, and there's deep healing just in being there while someone else is going through it.
Very much so. And so the way that I like to approach this is at first just to hear you saying your dreams, and no need to try to analyze or interpret, but just listen and observe and recognize certain patterns that are coming through, maybe certain situations, dynamics, people that are coming through the different dreams, different maybe background, certain areas, places. So it's good to just observe and notice the patterns without trying to understand what it's about.
Okay, so you told me when I made this list to include the very first dream that I had after you gave me the assignment to start writing my dreams down, and also the last dream that I had before this this conversation we're having right now, and then a handful of the most relevant ones in between that I thought should be included. So that's what I'm going to read out.
Okay, great.
All right, should I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Dream number 1. I'm looking in the mirror and running my fingers through a really long and gray beard on my face. It's a Ram Dass-like beard. But while I'm showing it off to Roman, who is standing somewhere nearby but out of view, I see that it is a lot flimsier and patchy than I initially thought. End of dream. Dream number 2. Michelle and I are in bed in a hotel. Michelle's my wife. I am about to leave because her other lover is about to show up. I'm okay with this. I pick up our youngest son, Rowan, who is the size of a hamster, and bring him with me. I walk down to the lobby, and Rowan seems to get smaller and smaller each minute. I'm not panicking about this, but I'm aware that it is occurring and keeping an eye on it. He gets to a certain size, and I decide it's best that I bring him back up to the hotel room. I'm now ascending a number of staircases to get back up to our room. On the 4th or 5th switchback of stairs, they begin to turn into more of a loose scaffolding, which is barely connected to the outside of the hotel. As I step up the stairs, pieces of the railing begin to fall off and drop down to the cordoned off sidewalk area below. I'm having a harder time holding on to Rowan, who is now the size of a mouse, while navigating the crumbling steps that are hanging in open space. My dad is suddenly there. I slip and drop Rowan, who doesn't look like anything human or alive at this point. He is an object or figurine. My dad catches him before he slips between the stairs, which have an open air in between them, like deck steps. The figurine is now a clump of wax in his hand. I tell him not to worry, that Rowan will be fine, and he says, "Oh, of course he will be. We just need to get him up to the room." A crew of construction workers in the sidewalk down below yell up to us as more of our stairway crashes down into the street below. End of dream. Next dream. I'm watching the news. A big apartment fire across the lake from us killed a bunch of people, but all the cats who lived in the building made it out alive. On the screen, firefighters are putting out the flames, and in the foreground, at least 50 cats are laying lazily about, licking themselves casually. End of dream. I am walking through a new city. Well, this is the next dream. I am walking through a new city. I don't know where it is, but it's hilly and has sort of a sloping main street that leads downtown. A lot of people are walking around, and I am now running through an intersection with a do not walk sign lit up as traffic beeps at me. I make it safely to the other side of the street and begin to wonder where the heck I am on this beautiful sunny day. Then I see 2 men pulling out some crazy looking samovar type vessel from a restaurant on the sidewalk ahead of me. I asked them what city this is, and they shrug and say they don't know. I then ask them what country we're in. They look up and contemplate the blue sky above us and look back down at me and shrug again. A police officer walks by and I ask him what town we are in. He says, "You know, that's an interesting question. All you need to know is that we're all free in this place." Then he pulls out some weird device that has 100 different sized cups on it. It's almost like one of those moving metal planetary contraptions from Augro's Observatory in The Dark Crystal, the movie The Dark Crystal. He places it on the ground and it begins opening up underneath the samovar with 100 spouts, each cup positioning itself beneath the spout and catching the liquid that pours out. The cups and spouts begin to form a star-like shape. The cop turns to me and says, "This place is called Gonzalez." End of dream. Next dream. I am standing outside a New York City apartment at night with my 5-year-old son, River. We are waiting for Michelle and Rowan to come down the stairs. River walks over toward the street and laughs as he waves at a passing car full of friendly people. He wanders down the sidewalk, and I tell him to stick around and wait for me. He's now about 7 buildings down the sidewalk, headed toward a line of people waiting to enter another house. I call up to Michelle to hurry up and look down the street in his direction again. He's gone. Fear growing, I walk briskly in the direction of the line, expecting to see him mingling with the folks standing there. As I get closer, I realize it's a group of homeless folks waiting to get into a shelter. Not seeing him, I cut in front of everyone and run into the building, asking the workers there if they saw a young blonde-haired kid run in there. They say they haven't, and looking around the tight room, I realize he's not there. Panic. I run out into the street and look down the intersection to the crosswalk closest to us. No sign of him. I run to the corner and look up and down the avenue. He's nowhere. I run into shops and restaurants, peering into car windows as I go. A feeling of devastation begins to set in. All the scenarios of where he could be and what could happen to him take hold. An image of his body being thrown off of a bridge continues to play through my mind. I flash forward and I'm now downtown continuing to search for him, trying to put together the pieces of where he could be. All hope is lost. I wake up. Next dream. I'm in a futuristic glass ceiling museum with a bunch of people. We all walk out across a courtyard, and I realize that I'm hungry. It looks very Jetsons-like, with flying aircraft overhead. I turn around and walk back inside a big revolving doorway, and then see a metal detector area manned by a bunch of guards. I walk through carefully and then ask a handsome African-American gentleman, who is actually one of the patients we are filming for our new docuseries, but I don't realize this until after the dream, where the cafeteria is. He looks left and right at the other guards to make sure they haven't picked up on anything, and then says, "Come with me." He hits a button and a hidden doorway opens up in a big, modern-looking wooden wall to the right. We walk through, and there's a bustling cafeteria beyond it. We walk over to a small airport-looking restaurant counter, manned by 2 very alienish-looking women, kind of like the movie The Sixth Sense, human but with modifications and colorful wardrobes. The case of heated food in front of us is colorful and filled with delicious-looking dishes. Zaruk, who's the person we're filming for the documentary series, but is now playing the part of the security guard, orders some fish and walks over to a table behind us. I get something that looks like potatoes au gratin and then ask them if they have any chicken. "He asked if we had chicken," the bigger woman says and sings. "He asked if we have any chicken?" the other woman says, who I now realize is being played by Rihanna. "No!" "Oh." I see some breaded cutlets of some sort and assume they're fish. "Can I have some fish, please?" While they respond, an old Jewish woman in line comes over and says, "Have some of this too." And she slides a few pieces of glazed honey ham onto my tray with melted cheese in it. It all looks extremely unhealthy, but delicious. Rihanna comes around from the corner to an inconveniently positioned cash register and starts singing or droning some kind of weird alienish song as she types things into the machine. The checkout process crescendos with her hitting a big red enter button and then arching her head back and pulling out a long receipt from her mouth, kind of like a magician would do with scarves. Happy that this is over, I take my tray over to where the security guard, Zaruk, is sitting. As seated across from him, I see that his tray is gone. I lean in, suddenly feeling very kindred with him, and say, "Where's your food, man? Here, let's share this." And we both dig in. End of dream. Next dream. We are in my high school, outside of the new basketball gym. I have decided that we are going to separate this gym from the rest of the high school and take it with us, somewhere far away from here. The entire section of the school breaks off and begins floating through a Tron-like space. This feels very good and liberating. This particular piece of my old high school is a place I rarely dream about. And now that I'm writing this down, I think it was where the door to the left would have led when I walked into the museum and through the metal detectors, asking Zaruk where the cafeteria was. Maybe this means that I'm putting this particular piece of my past behind me. End of dream. Next dream. I'm in some kind of spaceship airlock with my dad and another person. We are all sad because we did something wrong when we were crossing dimensions, and it caused a whole species of sea mammals to perish. It involved a glass of water that I'm holding in my hand. I make a joke to lighten the mood, and everyone laughs. End of dream. Next dream. I am on the top deck of a huge metal boat, kind of like one of those old ferry boats you take across the San Francisco Bay. It has a heavy iron hull that rises high above the water. I'm talking to my Uncle Bob about how this boat does a really cool trick and that he's about to experience it. A second later, the boat goes down a steep slide and splashes into the Hudson River. The captain must have cut the wheel hard to the left because the boat lurches to its side and flips over, dumping all of us into the water and closing in on top of us. I surface from being underwater in panic, looking around for River and Rowan. I see other people swimming, some floating lifeless in the water, but not my two boys. I then see River underwater to my left and pull him up. He has a yellow life preserver on, but it's not working very well. I push on his chest and water comes out of his mouth, and he starts breathing and crying. He's okay, but where's Rowan? I yell out Rowan's name. River, who apparently is not only better, but has now grown by a few more years, tells me he's going to swim over to another area and look for Rowan. He leaves. I look down in my hand and notice that I am holding a tiny little human in my right hand. I look closer and it's Rowan. Although it looks nothing like him, more like a tiny hairless mouse. Whatever he is, he's still breathing. Next thing I know, I'm in an ER with doctors standing around a white table with Rowan's little form on it. We can see through his body, looking at his organs as his body labors to get each breath. I tell them that he hasn't eaten in a while, so they put him into a clear plastic sack and inject it full of some type of caramel-colored baby formula. His body disappears as it is immersed in this brownish-orange liquid, and then reappears inside the sack as his body absorbs all of it. He's still tiny, but is starting to look more like himself. End of dream.
Okay. Thank you for sharing
Thank you for listening.
the dreams, Nick.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, with dreams often a lot of inner dynamics come through, and a lot of one's life becomes apparent. It's in a way no hiding through the dreams. And what are the patterns that you can notice that have been coming up?
For me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've noticed this interesting pattern around my children being very protective and sort of feeling like there's impending doom, or there's something that needs to be, that needs to be guarded against. And obviously a lot of this is probably a reflection of myself, more than it is a reflection of them. But there definitely is a lot of dreaming about my kids, and this idea of Rowan always being this tiny little figurine or something that's very fragile. It's in my hand. I think is very interesting. It's been happening a lot, especially now that I'm writing them down. I'm noticing it happens all the time. And also the idea of River being in precarious situations. I had a dream last night, that I didn't include on here, that was, him getting stuck in a fence and not being and having to cut off his circulation, and him not being able to breathe, and me having to try to get him out from underneath it. So there's always these these emergencies that seem to happen, which is really interesting. And also there's a lot around my high school that I did not realize I was still dreaming about until I started writing it down. There's a lot of unresolved stuff, clearly, or there's symbolism behind my high school.
Yeah, also the mouse came through a couple of times. And also in looking for trying to find your way, or trying to find a way, and dealing with all kinds of suspense situations. So it's interesting. Some of those things can help bring the direction into the dream work. The dream work is a bit like detective work, finding that silver string that is going through the different patterns, the different dreams, and then bringing the message through. So I'll start going through the dreams and see how we can apply that universal language and what the message that is coming from that. So we'll start from the first one. I'm looking in the mirror and running my fingers through a really long and gray beard on my face. So looking in the mirror, in a way, seeing your image. And your image is an image of a really long and gray beard. So a certain wisdom that is appearing in your image, or how you would like to be seen. And it's a Ram Dass-like beard. And Ram Dass is a spiritual teacher that you're inspired by.
I mean, I think that he's someone who yes, I'm inspired by him. He's somebody who represents sort of this bridge between sort of the hip Western culture and of spiritual exploration, and maybe the more ancient lineages. And I just think that he's kind of reminds me of his wit, and the way he speaks has always kind of felt it's always resonated with me, because he grew up in the same part of the world that I did. So there's just the way that he speaks has got this New England kind of he's got this flow and this kind of cadence and kind of a little bit of sarcasm to what he's doing that I've always thought was an interesting and compelling approach to communicating what's going on with his work.
So maybe not taking himself too seriously.
Yeah.
So yes, a certain wisdom that maybe you'd like to cultivate or bring through in your life, and experiencing all kinds of different challenges and problems, but then working through it and having a good attitude in a way.
Yeah.
And then you're showing it off to Roman, who is standing somewhere nearby but out of view. So, and then of course it's good to remember that everyone who is appearing in your dream is representing a certain part of your greater self. And so, Roman, what kind of associations and characteristics I remind you of?
I think that you're someone who I look up to, and who is sort of a symbol to me of the work and the path, and staying true to the pull on how do I say it? The pull I have toward this work, and remembering that this is all an illusion, and that and that there's deeper meaning to everything, and that there's that. And you're also my friend, and you're someone who I just care for a lot, and
okay, good. So more than anything,
I'm trying to think of the nitty gritty here. Like there's other things. I mean, I feel like there's a kind of a, I don't really know how to put it. There's like it's almost like you're the shaman on my shoulder kind of a thing, where sometimes I'll be like, oh, really, you're gonna do that? And then I'll be like, what would Roman do? What would Roman say? How would Roman behave in this situation? So there's
Okay.
almost like that. Yeah.
Okay. So I would say a friend archetype, a spiritual friend, maybe someone who can bring some objectivity. And this I'm relating to because I'm not in the view, right? So in a way, I represent a part of you. And again, the qualities, they're not relating to me specifically, but what I symbolize to you, what I represent. And
Yeah.
because I'm standing out of you, outside of an appearance, you cannot see me, but in a way, it's this part of you that maybe is a more objective observer that can see things that are not um, what is maybe so easy to see, or to see something that is not so pleasant to see or to recognize, or to go beyond the image, right? Because in the mirror it relates to how one wants to appear. And you suddenly see that the beard is a lot flimsier and patchy than you initially thought. So this might relate that even though you can put on an appearance of someone who is easygoing and is not taking things so seriously, um, there is this a certain how to say, you can see through that appearance, through that image, that actually, yeah, you might be a bit more stressed out than what you want to believe, or maybe you're taking things a bit more serious than it seems to you.
Mm-hmm.
And it relates to this praxis, right? So it's not just how that may appear or may be convincing someone, but how it is for you, and how you can be um, more open and clear with yourself. And so in that way also, the first dream may bring through a certain rite of passage that you are working with. And because there is a long and gray beard, so there is a rite of passage into maturity, a rite of passage of stepping into the deeper wisdom of your life. So maybe not um, engaging in certain initiatives and projects that relate more to the appearance and appeasing the crowds, but seeing what can be more authentic,
Mm-hmm.
something that can be more real and is about the approach that you take towards it. And so then, how can you really come through this rite of passage and develop wisdom in your life that relates to the real meaning and not just to the appearance of it? So from here we'll go, does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Okay, so another thing with the dreams, that it has to click for you. So if for some reason you don't feel like it's quite, hitting the spot, or there's something, then, please let me know, because then that can help us see more what it's about. Or maybe I'm not expressing myself in the clearest way possible. So we'll go to the next one. So Michelle and I are in bed in the hotel. I'm about to leave because her other lover is about to show up, and I'm okay with this. So here, Michelle is your soul guide. So she's showing that there's something significant here. the and again, you know, you and her are in bed, so in a way there is a certain divine union. So she shows you that there is something that requires for you to come into wholeness. And the hotel, it's a building. The building in dreams often is a building that the self is living in. So in that way, it's a certain personality. And a hotel is a personality that it's not a steady personality that you live. It's not like your house.
Mm-hmm.
It's a place that you visit, and maybe, you know, work or vacation, but it's a temporary personality. So it's a certain personality that you have been um, renting or paying for a room, visiting in your life, and you're about to leave because her other lover is about to show up. So then, of course, looking at her other lover, and that is also a part of you. And yeah, what can you really recognize in that other lover? You know, who is that lover that your soul guide is pointing to? Someone that is able to fulfill her in a way that you can't. And this is something that is again relating to that aspect of yourself, you know, the aspect of yourself, why you and Michelle have fell in love in the first place. And you know, what is it that is missing in your relationship right now in your life? If you want to share some of your insights.
Yeah, so it's interesting as you were saying that, and going back to the first dream, I think that there is something there, and it's so tricky. Like it's so hard to continue to remember that everybody in these dreams is definitely me. Because for me in that one, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I'm okay. If there's another person, that's coming into the room. That's not, you know, I'll leave. Isn't that interesting that I'm so comfortable with this other, you know, lover showing up, and I thought that was interesting. But then you kind of turn it on its ear by, you know, by explaining that they're both me. So when you said that, I was thinking about this aspiration I have in our relationship to be more playful. You know, like I used to be a lot more goofy and silly and like, you know, childlike and carefree. And I think that, you know, with just things got busy, and so there's a lot of like a correction that I'm going for these days, where I'm like, wait a second, I'm not interested in not being silly and fun, you know, especially with two kids. I'm not interested in being silly all the time. So I think that was interesting that you saw that in the Ram Dass beard. And again, I think that maybe just in the inkling that I have is this other person that was going to show up after I left was going to be someone who was maybe a little more playful and available, you know, um, and and then I leave with Rowan. So that's almost like for me, it's almost like I'm being the serious, responsible, kind of taking care of business me, leaving for this other person to show up. So it almost just kind of it feels like that other me is about to show up is the me that might be a little bit more spontaneous and fun, you know, and that's the me that I really would like to be more of.
Or maybe it's just this younger, more immature part of you that in a way you need to really embrace and you know, embrace in a way of just recognize that yeah, that was the part of you that was just very carefree and playful and adventurous, but doing it in a more immature way.
Yeah.
And now you can still embrace those qualities, but in a more mature manner.
I love
And
that.
it doesn't have to be fragmented that way. And she's pointing to this, maybe like kind of dual linear mentality. I can be either this or that. And I cannot take care of my children and at the same time be this carefree, spontaneous, adventurous, lover. And so then, the wisdom is how to bring that duality together, how to unite, those aspects of yourself. And so then you pick up the youngest son, Rowan, who is the size of a hamster, and bring him with you. And so Rowan, he's like that, the child archetype, this, and this comes through where he's the size of a hamster or the mouse. And in a way that represents the life force in you, that impulse, that animal nature that is helping you to move towards the divine, that helping you to move towards your highest potential. And as a mouse, he's the size of a hamster. In a way, it's like it shows that with this kind of disconnect, maybe the vitality, the motivation has also been harder to bring forth, coming into maybe a middle age crisis or something like that, where it's like, well, what's going on here? What am I doing? What can I do in my life that can keep sparking me up, that can keep bringing me inspiration, motivation, something that is deeply fulfilling and purposeful, and not just, kind of going through the motion and fulfilling responsibilities. And so you carry this motivation with you, which has to do with this childlike being. And in a way, especially Rowan, how old is he right now? He's the same as my son. 7 months.
7 months. Yeah.
Yeah. So 7 months, and 7 months is just someone who's, I know from my son, just starting to discover the world, and is just very curious, and is, scooting around and going everywhere, and at the same time, someone that constantly has to be watched, doesn't hurt himself or nothing happens, and so in a way it's like this part of you that is this fresh and new, and at the same time maybe not very compatible with daily kind of existence, the mundane world of tasks and responsibilities. And so in a way it's like you're holding him, it's like your life is in your hands and you don't know necessarily what to do with it, how to approach it. And so you walk down the lobby and Rowan seems to get smaller and smaller each minute. So it's like, like this spark, and like maybe even like can slip through the hands, right? It gets so small. Maybe sometimes it's like, how do I maintain this focus and vision on the essence in my life of what truly inspires me in the midst of this hamster wheel, right? The hamster, because he's the size of a hamster. And you're not panicking about this, but you're aware that it is occurring and you're keeping an eye on it, right? So you are keeping an eye on this, on this diminishing spark in your life. And he gets to a certain size and you say it's best you bring him back up to the hotel room. And so suddenly like, yeah, if I take this out of context, if I take this spark out of context and I take it away from the soul guide and from this part of me that is the lover, and just get stuck in, mundane responsibilities, then I'm gonna lose it. And so needing to go back to that, and in a way the hotel is kind of like a certain personality that is in tune with change, right? As the hotel that travels, the adventure, the new perspectives, the new sights, new visions. So to bring it back, to bring the spark of curiosity, of openness into that state of being that you have initially experienced when you met your wife, that spark of your relationship, that inspiration and the, meeting each other as the rekindling of that original meaning and purpose. And so, yeah, needing to really get back into that room, get back into that, kind of like this room for thought, or that space of being in this, more adventurous place, and then bring that childlike nature and allow that spark to grow, right? Because in a way, also the relationship is like exploration, discovery, of oneself through each other's being. And so to come back into that discovery, to come back into that facing of yourself, facing of all of those different conundrums, this kind of places of difficulty and the mundane life, and how can you make that adventurous once again. And so you're not panicking about this, but you're aware that it is occurring. Keep in mind, he gets to a certain size, you decide to get back into the hotel room. You're now ascending a number of staircases. So you were going down, right, from that room. So in a way, needing to really face this, that yeah, you can go down that road. You can go down that road and you just live that mundane life and lose that spark of creativity and childlike essence. And in a way, it's that road into the underworld. And then, yeah, you lose that, original purpose for life just by trying to, in a way, live this kind of mundane kind of survival, just paying the bills and making sure that there is everything that is necessary on a physical level, but without that deeper meaning, it starts to disappear. And so now you're going back. Once you see that without that, none of the physical makes any sense, right? There has to be, bridging between the worlds, the spiritual and the material. So now you're ascending back, you're going back up. So going up in the dream language means to go back into the higher self. Sometimes it can also mean to go, back into the thought process, into the head, right? So because here the child was disappearing, it makes sense that it's trying to get back up into that higher view, into that deeper meaning in your life. And so on the fourth or the fifth switchback of stairs, they begin to turn into more of a loose scaffolding, which is barely connected to the outside of the hotel. So it's interesting, the fourth and the fifth, right? So the fourth, the four often relates to wholeness, and it can also relate to the heart center. And then the fifth is related to the five senses. It can also relate to the center of expression. So how can you bring that heart purpose into an expression? And especially someone who is working with documentaries and movies, right? So bringing the heart essence to expression. How can you bring the heart into the senses, right? Into the world of the senses. And the stairway to heaven, because it's on the outside of the hotel in a way. So, and it begins to turn into more of a loose scaffolding, which is barely connected to the outside of the hotel. And so, yeah, it's loose. It's hard to bring that essence into a way that others can relate. And it's on the outside of the personality. So you have to step outside of yourself in order to really learn how to bring that through. Outside of your comfort zone, outside of your habitual way of being. And so, as you step up the stairs, pieces of railing begin to fall off and drop down to the cordoned off sidewalk area below. So it's like each step that you make, the other steps fall. So that kind of like relates to this essence which is alive. It's not something that can be contained, right? And this is the essence of the heart. The heart cannot be contained into an appearance. The appearance can only point to it. But the love, the true love that is unconditional, cannot be limited. It cannot be held hostage, right? It's something that has to keep flowing. And especially because you're going back to the soul guide, and she's pointing you that it's not possible to live a life that is about abiding in the heart and then try to do it in a very old habitual way. So it's like, yeah, you can come back into that state of being, but it can no longer be bound by the same circumstances. You can no longer be this immature guy who is just, running around and having fun. But now you have certain responsibilities, you have a certain purpose, and it's up to you to learn how to share this heart essence in a new way. And in a way that is always changing. And it's not like learning some kind of a trick and then keep, doing this trick in order to keep getting the same result. It doesn't work that way with life's essence. It requires this continuous beginner's mind, this childlike essence approach. And so, yeah, you're having a harder time holding on to Rowan, who is now the size of a mouse, while navigating the crumbling steps that are hanging in open space. Right? So the open space, that open space of the heart. And learning how to bring that heart, how to bring that open space of the heart into the continuous change in life. Nothing remains the same. And so rather than trying to reach for the old comfort zone or try to do things in the way that they were before, that's no longer working. This essence of evolution of the childlike being, not childish, right, but childlike, can only be cultivated through openness. And so again here, you know, this is relating to that previous scenario, the first dream, where, yeah, the true wisdom is about this beginner's mind. It's about this willingness to look beyond appearance. And your father is suddenly there, and you slip and drop Rowan, who doesn't look like anything human or alive. So in a way, you're not able to maintain that essence. And you slip and you drop, right? You drop that essence, and Rowan doesn't look like anything human or alive anymore. He's an object or a figurine. So in a way, how do you lose it? How do you slip this, you know, drop this essence? By, you know, grasping onto the appearances, by keep going through the motions and maintaining an image without actually having that essence available. And that's also part of this underworld, right? Going into the underworld, needing to lose yourself in order to find yourself. And you know that, you know, comes through in a way as a fear that you're facing. It's like, well, what if I'm gonna lose everything? What if I'm gonna lose that spark of inspiration that allowed me to come to this point in life? And then needing to face that fear. And your father, you know, that symbol of consciousness, he is there to support you, is to bring light into this essential rite of passage. This is your process of maturation. And so he catches him before he sleeps between the stairs. So in a way, the light of consciousness says, okay, look, you know, even though, you know, the self, the hero has to face the impossible at a certain point. It's like, yeah, with your effort and with your ability, you cannot do it. The only thing that can help is the intention, right? Is this continuous intention and dedication that you have been cultivating, so that even though your limited self is dropping it, the higher consciousness is able to keep it for you and show you, look, you know, what this means. What is this really about? And so before he sleeps between the stairs, right? So it's like the stepping stones of your life. And so it sleeps between them, between the stepping stones. And so in a way, it's kind of like, yeah, it has to do with how you step, right? Instead of maybe just forgetting about the previous step, or maybe judging the previous step. We're like, oh yeah, that's how I used to be then, and I'm not supposed to be like that now, and I'm supposed to be something else, and then losing the essence in between. And so, yeah, it has open air in between them, right? So there's that open air, that spaciousness, losing it in the spaciousness. It's like, you know, between the different tasks and initiatives, and then maybe just trying to catch your breath instead of actually seeing that this breath is the essence.
Mm-hmm.
This breath is that you are seeing in between what is happening. You know, that's actually what you live for. And it also has to do with him being small and you not knowing what to do with him in your life, you know, with that spark. And so then the figurine is now a clump of wax in his hand. And it's interesting, you know, we talk about the spark and wax, right, and the wax candles.
Yeah.
And you tell him not to worry, that Rowan will be fine. And he says, oh, of course he will be fine. We just need to get him up to the room. Room to breathe, right? And your father, and so you tell him not to worry, but in the way that you tell him, it's kind of like you're worrying. And just trying to, no, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay, you know, right? And it's like, kind of like, you know, a big part of the dream is to recognize the self-deception. And then you're saying that you're, you know, not to worry, but he says, yeah, of course he will be. As long as you get him up to the room. So bringing that symbol, you know, because now he's a symbol. He's a symbol of that candle that it's up to you to light up. And the way that you can light up that candle is to bring that symbol of your life, of your meaning, of your spark of creativity and childlike discovery back into that room where the soul guide, who is also the expression of your creative potential, right? She is that feminine expression of creativity, the source of creative potential that gave birth to your child. And it's up to you to bring that spark back to that creative, the true creative meaning. Not just creative meaning that is putting up some kind of an appearance, but the true creative meaning is the creation of life. And so, what is life for you in the deepest sense of that? And so instead of trying to, you know, appear like everything is fine and you shouldn't take it seriously and everything is going to be okay, then instead of that, seeing how can you nurture all of those deficient parts in yourself? How can you utilize this creativity to bring healing love into the deepest part of your being that is feeling exhausted, that is feeling disempowered, that is running through the hamster wheel? Does that make sense?
That does make sense. A lot of sense.
And so, yeah, so you see that you just need to get him up to the room. You know, through all of those kind of like, you know, juggling and following staircases, you know, it's like you need to really, that's the hero's journey, right? To bring that figurine, that key that unlocks the source of creative potential, the unconditional love. And then a crew of construction workers in the sidewalk down below yell up to us as more of our stairway crashes down in the street below. So the crew of construction workers, are they all men?
I think so.
So it's like this masculine energy that is like trying to build and like do. And it's like, yeah, we're going to build this, you know, vision. We're going to build this, you know, personality. But, you know, actually, you know, if there's like a lot, you know, a lot of construction workers It's like a lot of masculine energy, you know, without that source of creative love to guide it, and then getting stressed out, and you know, all kinds of accidents in the building process, and you know, not being able to maintain the focus because of lack of that nurture, lack of that room for breathing. So we go to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Next one I'm watching. Huh?
Thank you for that. That was pretty epic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you start to recognize the meaning of the dream when you can feel the intensity rising in yourself, when it's not just a story, it's not just the words, but it's like, oh, there is something here.
Yeah.
And you know, this again is relevant, and the reason that it comes through is because it's also relevant in my own life, and I'm sure many others who are watching. And so here I'm watching the news, right? A big apartment fire across the lake from us killed a bunch of people, but all the cats who lived in the building made it out alive. So you're watching the news on the television, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the television, you know, it's a certain appearance, it's a story, and it's the news. So like, what kind of story are you telling yourself in your head? So let's see, a big apartment fire, right? So across the lake from us, is it like a, you know which lake it is?
No, I've never been. I can still envision the lake in my head, and it's not a lake that I recall.
Is it a round shape? Oval?
It's one of those lakes that's so big. It's probably so big that I wouldn't even be able to tell you the shape of it.
Okay, great. So a big lake, and in dreams the water relates to subconsciousness, and it's a natural body of water. So it relates to this, you know, the natural part of you that in a way is submerged. You know, it's this natural being. And so across from the lake, in a big apartment, in a building, right? In a big story building, and that, you know, the big story building, you know, the city in general relates to everyday consciousness. And so it's like everyday consciousness, big apartment, so in a way just, you know, having certain goals in everyday life, society, needing to accomplish things, making sure that there is a big apartment, a certain space for the qualities, for the characteristics, for the necessary abilities within you to thrive. And so there is a fire in that apartment. And so it's kind of like this fire that is just destroying. And this fire, in a way, seems like it's relating to anxiety, stress, this maybe fire of just exhaustion, you know, like burnt out. You know, that's the language of dreams, right?
Mm-hmm.
So getting, you know, burnt out, and yeah, getting burnt out by trying to accomplish the demands of everyday society. And there's this apartment building, kind of like generic value system, and trying to catch up to, you know, the different needs, and you know, competitive environment. And so yeah, so the fire killed a bunch of people. So the people in dreams also, again, they relate to the different aspects of the personality, the different qualities, the different characteristics. And so, you know, maybe like all of those parts of you that are based on superficial values and are trying to live in this system and survive in it, all of those parts are getting burnt out. But all the cats that live in the building made it out alive. And the cat, again, the cat relates to that animal aspect. And it's interesting, the cat and the mouse, in the previous dream was the mouse. And here we have the cats. And in a way, the cat that is catching the mouse.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, the cat is more intuitive. The cat is like this kind of playful, intuitive, you know, animal that is also just knows how to enjoy and purr, and at the same time very agile. And so, you know, the cat in you, you know, this kind of intuitive being, this, you know, when the mind, you know, breaks down and, you know, all the stress and all those things, you know, there is this fresh, intuitive, cat-like quality that is able to actually come out. And it's also like, you know, the 7 lives of the cat. And number 7 came through, no? Before.
Number 7, 4 or 5 did.
4, 5, but then, okay. There was something about, Rowan, who's 7 months old. Right? So, so yeah, the cats, so you know, the cats who have 7 lives. Right?
I thought they had 9 lives.
9, you're right. They have 9 lives. Okay.
Sorry.
You caught me. That's okay. So yeah, so all the cats who live in the building made it out alive. And so yeah, so it's this, you know, all of those artificial personality constructs, they cannot survive this pressure cooker of transformation that you put yourself in. The only thing that can survive is this intuitive wisdom. And on the screen, the firefighters are putting out the flames, and in the foreground, at least 50 cats are laying lazily about, licking themselves casually. So again, number 5 appears here. And again, you know, it's like, yeah, when you stop trying to express yourself intuitively, you can bring it through.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so this is that fresh, spontaneous quality. And so then, yeah, the firefighters, and, you know, it's like this, again, you know, maybe more masculine profession. And, you know, just trying to put out the fire and just, you know, this kind of, you know, uniform and this struggle, you know, the color red, right? It's like this kind of survival seems to come through. And yeah, so just, you know, struggling and trying to put out the fire and dealing with all this anxiety and stress. And in the foreground, 50 cats. So number 5 is like the 5 senses, again, the expression, and laying lazily about, licking themselves casually. So it's like essentially, yeah, you have this intuitive knowing how to deal with that stress, you know, beyond, you know, what the mind is capable of, you know, dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And in the way it comes through when real emergency comes, you know, and it's like suddenly this button switches on. It's like, oh, well, you know, that it is what it is, you know, I might as well just relax, right? But until it comes to that kind of like boiling point,
Yeah.
you know, there's like stress and trying to, and then at a certain point, like, okay, well, that's where we're at, you know, and so this is the dynamic that is coming through. So far, so good?
Yeah, it's really, really good.
Okay, it's really important to look at the tendencies, like what kind of, you know, underneath the symbols, what is the energy that they are relating to.
Mm-hmm.
So, next one. I'm walking through a new city. I don't know where it is, but it's hilly and has a sort of a sloping main street that leads downtown. So, new city. So with that old city burning down, you have to find a new approach that is not based, you don't have to wait until like everything burns down for you to connect to that intuitive wisdom of well-being, right? You have to, you know, walk into a new city, a new approach to everyday life. You don't know where it is, but it's healing, right? So that's kind of like, you know, all kinds of, you know, ups and downs. And there's a sort of sloping main street that leads downtown.
Mm-hmm.
So sloping like leading down, or how?
Yeah, it's just got like a almost like a sort of like a San Francisco Bay Area, maybe like just one of those like just on a hill, like sloping on a hill.
Okay, so where you used to live, but now it's a new city.
Yeah.
And if you wanna share a little bit about what San Francisco, what about San Francisco that you associate with?
Well, I just want to clarify, when I think about this particular location, it doesn't remind me at all of San Francisco. It doesn't feel the same. I don't know. It's, you know what I mean? Like there are places in my dreams that now that I'm starting to tune into them, like I know that they are associated with a certain other space. And
Okay.
it's got a slopiness to it. And it's so weird because it's so fresh. It doesn't have anything. There's no other landscape that I could yeah.
Beautiful. So it's a very fresh way of being.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're going down in that city. So it's like, okay, well, let's test, you know, what that new approach to life can bring. So now you're going down towards downtown, right? Again, you're going down the slope into the downtown. Downtown area is usually an area, it's like a cultural area. Maybe there's like, you know, places like cafes, restaurants, places to hang out. And so it leads downtown. A lot of people are walking around. You are now running through an intersection with a do not walk sign lit up as traffic beeps at you. So you're on foot.
Yeah.
Running through the intersection. So it's like, okay, so yeah, you have to walk on your 2 feet. You know, have your 2 feet on the ground. It's no longer, you know, not behind any personality. You know, the car can also be a transitional personality. But now, yeah, you're walking through, there's a do not walk sign. Do not walk sign that is lit up, and you're still walking. And so in a way, you are breaking the rules. And you are a jaywalker, so to speak. Right?
Yeah.
And you know, a jaywalker has another meaning to it, which is kind of like a happy walker. And so you decide that whatever happens in your life, you're going to make a commitment to being happy. And you're not going to let yourself get discouraged and get stressed out over all kinds of challenges that are constantly happening. And so the traffic beeps at you, and it's kind of like this, you know, stress. It's like, you know, people are stressed out. People are like, you know, in traffic, you know, trying to kind of like live in this generic life. But, you know, you are not bound by that. And you make it safely to the other side of the street, you know, because the street is also, it's the life channel. And it's like this, all of those emotions and energies that are moving through the traffic in that life channel. And so you're able to overcome all of those different emotions and feelings that are difficult to work with. And so you begin to wonder where the heck you are on this beautiful sunny day. So it's like, yeah, it's, you know, finding your way, and, you know, and where are you really going with that? What is the meaning? Where is this journey leading? And then you see two men pulling out some crazy looking samovar type vessel from a restaurant onto a sidewalk ahead of you. So two men, right? Duality. And then the man is the masculine, you know, some kind of a mental process, some inner mental conflict. It's like, well, yeah, well, what can I do with this beautiful sunny day? What can I do with this well-being? What is the purpose of all of this? And there's like, yeah, you know, how can I, you know, really make this into something useful? And they are pulling out some crazy looking samovar type vessel, you know, and samovar, you know, Russian culture, you know, it's like drinking tea. And it's like, you know, drinking tea, relaxing, enjoying. And so again, like, how, you know, first of all, like, how do I bring enjoyment into everyday life? And then what is the purpose of me enjoying my everyday life? Another thing with the samovar, it has that boot, that kind of like leather boot on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a way, it's kind of like, you know, the boot's usually supposed to be on the ground, but then you're starting to see what is the practical use of restfulness. You know, life is not just to kind of like keep running around, but what practical the restfulness has. The restaurant also has food. The food in dreams is food for thought. So you ask them what city this is, and they shrug and say they don't know. It's like, and so this like mental process is like, yeah, you know, it's like, maybe you're not supposed to figure everything out. Life is a mystery. It's boring to live a life where everything is figured out. And then you ask them what country we're in, and they look up and contemplate the blue sky above us, and then down at you and shrug again. And so it's like, yeah, it's like, you know, does it matter what country this is if you can really live your life in a way that is joyful and restful, and you are well? And so then, yeah, the Mother Earth has no borders. And, you know, the blue sky, you know, it's that, again, that spaciousness of the heart, the room to breathe, right? You know, what kind of purpose can life has if there is not even room to breathe and enjoy the life that you're having? There's no sense in being a martyr. And so then, and they shrug again. It's like, yeah, it's like, just, you know, enjoy the tea. Kind of like a Mad Hatter tea party. And so then a police officer walks by and you ask him, and you said what town we're in. And the police officer in dreams, this may relate to bringing order into your life, like law and order. So what has a higher priority, a greater order in your life? And he says, that's an interesting question. All you need to know is that we are all free in this place, right? So in a way, it's kind of like the land of the free, the original land of the free. Because even here on Earth, everything is patterned to that dream language, but then we forget. And then the land of the free becomes, just a very hectic place. But here, he says, is the land of the free. We're all free in this place. That's the purpose, to be free, to be well, to be free, to be happy, to find the happiness that is based on freedom and not based on anything else. And that's the lasting happiness. It's not happiness that is based on enjoyment or instant gratification. It's based on freedom. No longer being bound by, externally imposed concepts and rules and regulations, who you are and what your life is supposed to be. And then he pulls some weird device that has 100 different sized cups on it. So the cups kind of like have a round thing in it. So it's kind of like the compensating factor. And it's almost like one of those moving metal planetary contraptions from Aura Observatory from Dark Crystal. So just to remind me, in the Dark Crystal, what was that contraption used for?
I think it was kind of I think it was planets. It was like this big, like rotating metal, like she had a huge observatory that had this huge metal, sort of a clock, kind of I don't even know what you call it, solar system almost. Like the ball in the middle is kind of like a sun, and there's different like spheres and
Okay,
moons.
I got you.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's like the model of the planetary system.
Mm-hmm.
How all of the worlds can revolve around the sun. And how, your world and all of the different worlds in you can revolve around that bright light, that bright meaning that gives life. And catching the liquid that pours out, and the cups and spouts begin to form a star-like shape. And it's on the ground, begins opening up underneath the samovar. So it's like, from this place, from this recognition of that samovar, the samovar, the translation of it also is the ability to cook yourself. So the ability, it's kind of like this alchemical pot of transformation, and how it's the ability to find that purpose and meaning, that essence within yourself. And then that liquid starts to pour out, and then the cups and the spouts begin to form a star-like shape, like mandala. But that's really like a rite of passage. And so it's like out of this meaning of restfulness and purpose and freedom, then this nectar that is allows you to actually bring well-being to others. And it's like this star, this excellence, the star of your potential that is manifesting. And then he turns to you and he says, the place is called Gonzales. And so Gonzales is interesting because, maybe, it's referring to a Latin American country. I know that you've been spending time in Central America, in Peru, and, there is a certain, Mexico maybe, a certain mentality that is more closer to the earth, where people yeah, they might not have, all kinds of different comforts, but they know how to be truly happy. And in that way, there may be something pointing to here. It's like, yeah, really tuning in into, the quality of life rather than quantity. So from here, we already start to see more and more, right? It's like the first dream brings us a general direction, kind of like a general map, and then with each one we can see greater and greater detail about what that rite of passage is, how you can come towards it, what you can do with it, and what are all the details that can help you with that. And so then here, next dream, you're standing outside a New York City apartment at night with your 5-year-old son, River. We're waiting for Michelle and Rowan to come down the stairs. So New York City, hectic, stressful, also a lot of cultures coalesce, and maybe it's a New York, so the previous dream was a new city, right? So now New York City. So in a way, again, it's like, okay, now you come to a place that is more familiar to you from your childhood, just from what I know about you. And at the same time, how do you bring this restful discipline into your old dynamics at night? So night is the subconsciousness, right? So it's like, what is happening? What are the energies and dynamics with your 5-year-old son, River? So again, number 5, right? Coming through. Now here, interesting, also very valid question in dreams. Anything particular happened to you when you were 5?
Five is kindergarten age.
Sure.
Yeah, there's a couple things that stand out. I don't know. Do I just start? I mean, there's
Sure.
the one thing I remember about being 5 years old is was in kindergarten and I slammed a girl's finger in the door and her finger literally like came off.
Okay.
So that, I think that probably like just punctuates my being 5 for me. Something
Okay.
really, yeah.
Anything else in your family dynamics, moving?
I was 5. It's the first time that you get put on a bus. At least
Okay.
it was the first time you get put. 5.5, 6, I think maybe was when I think, but for some reason I think that when I was 5, I was already riding the bus.
So in a way, you have to assume greater responsibility for your life, and yeah, it's like you have to be accountable for your actions. And so, you are with your 5-year-old son, River, and waiting for Michelle and Rowan to come down the stairs. So the soul guide, the lover, is with that pure essence of life that you're waiting for. And you're with the 5-year-old. So again, it's like number 5, the expression, the world of the senses. And also, the name River, it's like, how do you channel your emotions, your senses, how you deal with yourself? What you mentioned about slamming the door, it's like, yeah, how do you channel your emotions? How do you deal with yourself? And this may be that time when you started to be afraid maybe to make mistakes and maybe not to hurt someone, and be afraid to be this kind of you know, spontaneous, open, relaxed child. And the river walks over towards the street and laughs as he waves at a passing car full of friendly people. And so, walking towards the street, right? So it's like the river of emotions, in a way that, you know, childlike energy, then yeah, is waving at the passing car full of friendly people. So the car is a personality and the friendly people. So in a way, it's kind of like, yeah, I can be like a child only when, you know, when I can act friendly, maybe. And only when, you know, it's, you know, I'm passing by. But if I spend for a long period of time, you know, with people and, you know, and I have other expressions that want to come through, maybe genuinely being hurt or sad or upset, maybe that's more difficult. And so he wanders down the sidewalk and you tell him to stick around and wait for you. And he's now about 7 buildings down the sidewalk, headed towards a line of people waiting to enter another house. You call up to Michelle to hurry up and then look down the street in that direction and he's gone. So fear is growing, right? So again, it's like this fear. And number 7, again, right? And, you know, number 7 can also be this kind of like, in sacred geometry, this is a number that relates to the virgin number. It's the only number that, what is it, that cannot have a precise sacred geometry pattern, something like this. My wife knows it better than me. But yeah, it's like not fitting the standard, not fitting the bill, being like an, you know, an oddball. And line of people waiting to enter into another house. And so you call to Michelle, and then he's gone. Fear is growing. You walk briskly in that direction of the line, expecting to see him mingling with the folks standing there. And as you get closer, you realize it's a group of homeless folks waiting to get into a shelter. And so, again, it's like this part that feels homeless. It's this part that has gotten in a way stuck on the verge between the innocence, the childlike innocence, and the harsh reality of survival and looking for shelter. And you're not seeing him, and you cut in front of everyone, and you run into the building asking the workers there if they saw a young blonde-haired kid running there, and they say they haven't. And looking around the tight room, you realize he's not here. And so seeing that, yeah, it's like that child, that inner child, you know, it's like this inner child that cannot find a place in this world, that needs to find something practical, that needs to find a way to engage in this reality. And he's pointing to this kind of homeless shelter. And at the same time, he's not there. And it's again, it's you know, and what he's pointing to. He's pointing to panic and fear. And it's like dealing with New York City, dealing with all of this, you know, convergence of just competitive living and people running around and accomplishing and just stress and anxiety, and he gets lost in that world. And there is this panic of, you know, again, you run into the streets and look for the intersection closest to us and no sign of him. So the intersection, right? Again, you know, coming, you know, how do you bring this together? How do you bring this just you know, wanting to be a child that can just enjoy life and appreciate life for what it is, and this kind of hectic survival existence. So intersect, and not being able to see that, you know, not being able to see how you can bring that. You either have to sacrifice your innocence and just become, you know, this kind of cold-blooded New York businessman, or just take care of that child. And so you run to the street, so you run to the corner and look up and down the avenue and he's nowhere. You run into the shops and restaurants, peering into car windows as you go. A feeling of devastation begins to set in. Being devastated is another one that comes up. So fear, panic, and devastation. And in a way, where are you looking? You're looking in shops and restaurants and homeless shelters. So in a way, all of those places, you know, it's kind of like, you know, that expression, there's no one home, right? It's like no one home.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like the shops and restaurants, it's the consumerist mentality. And, you know, the homeless is that, yeah, when there is no essence, there is just the image, the personality, but there's no living consciousness within it. And you cannot find that childlike essence, that living consciousness in this superficial world. And all the scenarios of where he could be and what could happen to him take hold. An image of his body being thrown off of a bridge continues to play through your mind. So what is that, you know, being thrown? What is that bridge? The bridge between the worlds. It's the bridge between the islands, right? Especially the New York and the 5 boroughs. The islands, the fragmented consciousness. Instead, this fragmented childhood, fragmented innocence that is being sacrificed into the consumerist mentality, right? As we can see that it's this language that is being used on television, in commercials. You can see this expression of true happiness and this childlike spark, and then advertising a shampoo, right? So it's like sacrificing that original essence to the consumerist mentality. And so then all hope is lost. And so yeah, you flash forward, you downtown continue to search for him, trying to put together the pieces of where he could be. So downtown again. And you know, where before it was like pointing you with that new city and downtown, and how you can only find it within yourself. The land of the free. The land of the free can only be free because of freedom being found from within. And then, of course, the shadow version of the land of the free is where everyone are trying to grasp that freedom in things that can never bring that freedom. So it's interesting, you know, this dynamic that is being pointed out. So next one, you're in a futuristic glass-ceilinged museum with a bunch of people. We all walk out across the courtyard and you realize that you're hungry. It looks very Jetson-like. So, museum, glass ceiling museum. And the courtyard. So, you know, the courtyard, the expression of that relates to the court. And maybe the ability to discern or to judge what is happening in your life. And the museum, it's interesting, it's futuristic, and seems like maybe the museum is showing some old-fashioned life.
Maybe.
Do you remember?
Well, I don't know what the museum was really pointing to. I mean, there wasn't really, it was in the future. I don't know that the museum was necessarily a place that you go to look at old-fashioned things per se. It may be, it might be, but I didn't get to see anything inside the museum, so I didn't see what it was actually being featured there. But it was a very modern-looking museum.
Right. Still, the word museum relates to history. And so there is the future and there is the past here. And you are in the future. So in a way, maybe planning things out. And at the same time, this also is somewhat relevant to that second dream where there was that lover from the past. And then there is this future of kind of domino effect, you know, the stairway into heaven, running to accomplish something that is very ephemeral, slipping through the fingers. And so it's interesting how, yeah, there's the past and then there's the future, and you are walking across a courtyard. So in a way, judging, well, this is what I'm after, and this is where I come from, and you're hungry, right? That's not fulfilling, to be living in between the worlds, right? This is also relating to that stairway, that you were losing your essence through the stairs, between the future and the past, not living in the present. And you're hungry. And again, in dreams, the hunger is the hunger for the thought, the food for thought, something that is truly fulfilling. And you turn around and walk back inside a big revolving doorway, and then see a metal detector area manned by a bunch of guards. So the revolving doorway, kind of like a what do you call it, casino, the roulette. And metal detector area and a bunch of guards. So the guards of the presence, the guards of the true spark of life that can only exist in the presence. And you walk through carefully and then ask a handsome African-American gentleman who's actually one of the patients you're filming for the new documentary series. But you don't realize it until now after the dream. And so, do you know what you're filming him for, or?
He is someone who has been using herbs to connect in a very psychic way to his family, and also for astral travel in his dreams.
Beautiful. So in a way, it's this part of you that is connected with nature in a very intuitive way, and is connected to the realm that is beyond the physical. And yeah, you are filming him for the docu-series, and at the same time, yet he signifies something much more meaningful for you. In a way, he is the guardian of that essence. He's like the Sphinx, right? That is the guardian of the truth. And so he looks. You ask where the cafeteria is. Again, the cafeteria, the coffee is awakening, and then food for thought that is relating to this process of judging your life and not living in the presence, and scheming, some kind of ways that you think will bring you towards happiness, but it's just a hamster wheel, right? It's this language that is coming through. And then he looks left and right at the other guards to make sure they haven't picked up on anything, and says, "Come with me." He hits a button and the hidden doorway opened up, and a big modern looking wooden wall to the right. We walk through and there is a bustling cafeteria beyond it. So this part of you that maybe initially is not seen as something significant, he's a guardian, but he is a true guardian, the guardian of that human potential, and he leads you into this secret cafeteria where you can awaken and find the food for thought, find realization. We all over to a small airport-looking restaurant counter manned by two very alienish-looking women, kind of like the movie Sixth Sense. So the Sixth Sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
That psychic potential. And then airport-looking restaurant. So also the airport is the port towards the air. Again, it's the oxygen, the air, the spaciousness of the heart, the far destination. What is the true journey, right? This also came before in that new city, where the true journey is the destination, right? The airport. And the women are alienish looking. So now we have two women. And so this, an alien in a way, not so familiar to you. This creative expression, this feminine side that is alien to you. And there is a duality there. This, a certain strange way to express yourself. Humans, but with modifications and colorful wardrobes. So also not, very unusual, not standard, do not fit into this reality. The case of heated food in front of us is colorful and filled with delicious looking dishes. So in this place where things are not standard, in this place that relates to this sixth sense, it relates to this intuitive wisdom that relates to this part of you, right? Because the guardian is also a part of you, this part of you that is the guardian. The part of you that is the guardian of innermost realization. And that part of you is supporting this very unusual creative expression that is also, alien from another world, not from this world. Has to do with maybe value system and meaning and being that is not from this modern society. And so Zaruk, the security guard, orders some fish. So fish also is food. The fish is often relates to the realizations that arise from the subconsciousness, from the water. Something that is slippery and hard to integrate. And so it's, this understanding of yourself that has been evading you. And you get something that looks like potatoes au gratin. I don't know what that means.
It's like a cheesy potato,
Okay.
cheesy kind of like potato.
So yeah, so you get cheesy potatoes. Right? And then ask them if they have any chicken. And he asked if we have any chicken. The bigger woman sings. He asked if we have any chicken. The other one says, who I know realizes being played by Rihanna. No. And so, cheese, potatoes, and chicken. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like being cheesy, and potatoes kind of like very, maybe blunt, like potatoes, and being cheesy, not being original, and then being a chicken, right? So maybe being afraid, being original. And then it's like those two alien women, they're like, no, you can't be afraid to be original here. We are aliens. And Rihanna, the singer,
Yeah.
she can be original, no?
Yeah.
Oh, I see some breaded cutlets of some sort and assume they're fish. Can I have some fish, please? While they respond, an old Jewish woman in line comes over and says, have some of this too, and she slides a few pieces of glazed honey ham onto your tray with melted cheese in it. It all looks extremely unhealthy, but delicious. And so, the old Jewish woman gives you ham. That's not kosher, right? And so they're all pointing. This old Jewish woman is this the wise old woman archetype. Mm-hmm. She comes through and she shows you the greater wisdom.
She showed up in a couple other dreams too, but I didn't.
Don't try to conform. Don't try to play by the rules. Don't try to always have this equation of success. Eat the ham and some, melted cheese. In a way, it's like to break through the concepts, to come out of this limitation of the personality, and to approach life in a fresh and spontaneous way. Rihanna comes around from the counter to an inconveniently positioned cash register and starts singing, droning some kind of weird alienish song as she types things into the machine. The checkout process crescendos with her hitting a big red enter button and then arching her hess back and pulling out a long receipt from her mouth, kind of like a magician would do with scarves. So yeah, it's a checkout machine, and in a way you have to pay for your, you know, insights in life, for the food for thought. And so then, yeah, in order to pay for the food, what do you pay with? You pay with your life energy. You pay with your dedication to really get to the root, to get to the lesson. And then, yeah, she's singing and droning as she's doing that. So that's also part of that creative expression. Basically, yeah, the more effort that you can bring into the meaning of your life, the more you can actually find the expression of your potential.
Mm-hmm.
And then the big red button, in a way, it's again, it's like that emergency, really pressing the red button so that you can, you know, basically get what you deserve, which is that long receipt from her mouth. And yeah, in a way, this long receipt is kind of like it's time to pay your dues. This food for thought has been long coming, and so it's essential to bring yourself together, bring your effort together, in order to finally learn that lesson. And kind of like a magician would do with scarves. So in a way, it's like pulling this out, and it's a bit maybe also like purging. It's like purifying, you know, like all of those tricks, like the magician tricks, the illusionist, purifying and no longer being satisfied with illusions in your life, but coming to that true essence that is weird, that is not something that is generic in this life. And so then you're happy that it's over, you take your tray over to where the security guard is and have a seat across from him. His tray is gone. You lean in, suddenly feeling very kindred with him, and you say, "Where's your food, man? Here, let's share this." And we both dig in. Because he is you. Because he is that unintegrated part of you, and you've been guarding. You've been protecting this essence from yourself even. And now it's time to really share this essence with yourself. That's pretty cool.
Hey, brother, you know what? We're at the 3 hour and 15 minute mark here.
Yeah. So just to bring it to conclusion, because yeah, you can see how it's the same message that keeps coming through in deeper and deeper and more detailed ways, right? And it's pointing you to different age periods, different processes and aspects of yourself. And so, yeah, then we keep going, you know, and we come through the high school, and you can see that you have met Zaruk in high school, the cafeteria. And it was the first place where you started guarding this unique expression of yourself. And it's this place where, yeah, in high school, there's certain what do you call it, peer pressure and popularity and all of those things, and being, you know, judged based on superficial things. And then, yeah, there is this dynamics that you can see that came through. So it's good to bring that into the remembrance. Really remember those energies and dynamics, and then be able to process it. It's not about resolving the past, but it's about seeing how the past is still influencing you, how you're still trapped within that competitive environment and dynamics, and trying to fit the bill and apply things that others may like or that are more acceptable, right? And so then, yeah, the coming back into this dream with the spaceship, that's a cool one, with the whole species of sea mammals. And again, the sea mammals is like this, what propels you, this fuel that charges your life, right? This animal energy that comes from the subconsciousness. What is really motivating you and pushing you forward? And so, yeah, this has to do with your father and another person, and all said because we did something wrong when we're crossing dimensions, coming out of that dimension of the fantasy world, the creativity, the imagination, and into this very physical, superficial reality, and then losing that inspiration. And this is maybe something that is relating to you, getting from your father also. And here in this dream, the father may manifest the conditioned ego of just trying to, live in this conditioned society, and then losing the motivation, losing the impetus to move forward in life towards that manifestation of the heart wishes, the dreams of your soul, the spaceships of imagination. And then you make a joke to lighten the mood and everyone laughs. And that's also kind of like a coping mechanism, right? A certain way to deal with conditioning. And so then a huge metal boat. And here it's a similar dynamic, right? Because you're talking to your Uncle Bob about a really cool trick that he's about to experience, and then suddenly goes into the Hudson River, and the boat is closing in on you, right? And so it's like, yeah, the subconsciousness. It's like trying to float and survive in this experience of just being dissatisfied, being discouraged, needing to survive, needing to respond to the external value system, and then, yeah, that the Hudson River, right, where the mafia throws all the corpses into. So then I used to live in New York for a period of time.
It's also the river that flows underneath it's also the river that flows underneath the bridge that I thought river was going to be thrown off of in my dream in New York City.
Yeah, that's it. That's a very good connection. Yeah, it's the river of despair, pollution. And so the Rowan, you're losing Rowan, you cannot find him, and then you're able to find him, right? And you're able to find him in a way he was there with you, as you are in this river and trying to look, and yeah, river is going to swim over to another area and look for Rowan. And so, yeah, that part of you that is in between the worlds, that cannot find the place, is, yeah, very concerned, because, yeah, this is that original connection, right? It's like the river is in between the worlds, and Rowan is on one side and you're on another. And so he's going, the river is going, and in a way this river represents that behavior in you, that behavior when you were 5 years old, and just trying to be responsible and deal with things. And at the same time, it's kind of like getting in over one's head. And so then when you are able to trust river to be responsible and not underestimate him. Only at that point you actually discover Rowan. And it's a tiny human, you look closer, and now he's looking more like a hairless mouse. So again, it's that mouse, right? It's that, it's like this, you can find that spark of the childlike essence, that original innocence, by really facing your subconsciousness, by acknowledging all of those anxieties and stresses and things that maybe you see impossible to deal with, where it's like, well, what can I do? How can I live my life in this way? I cannot follow my heart and at the same time be successful and feed my family. That's impossible. And actually it's within that your true essence and purpose of life lies. And so then, by facing your emotions, by facing this polluted river in you, right, the Hudson River, all of those different disempowerments and worries and anxieties, and then within that, from that, you can actually save. You can save that essence. You can save this hamster that has gotten exhausted and needs to be brought back to life, resuscitated. And then, into the ER, emergency room, right? So the emergence, it's like this wake-up call. It's not possible to keep living in this external value system and coming into that sense of emergence, standing for your true meaning and values in life, and not compromising, and not selling that for any appearance. And so then we can see through his body, looking at his organs, as his body labors to get every breath. So the choice of words here, the labor, right? So, being born, and he's 7 months old, and every breath, really being present with every breath that you make, not living in, worries about the past or anxieties about the future. And you tell him he hasn't eaten for a while, and they put him in a clear plastic sack and inject him with some type of caramel-colored baby formula. So caramel-colored is like brown, and in caramel it's kind of like sweet. So maybe this like sweetness. And then at the same time plastic. So it's clear plastic sack. So in a way, kind of clear plastic sack is kind of like for dead corpses or something. But in a way here, this is a place of resuscitation. So in a way, by actually acknowledging yourself as dead, you can become alive. By actually seeing all the ways that you have been dead in your life and just going through the motions and not being fully present, you can resuscitate yourself. And then, he's still tiny, but starting to look more like himself. So that spark of life, is something that you have to cultivate, something that you have to nurture continuously and work with. And only through that consistent effort, then the life can start really blossoming through you and from you to everyone in your life. So I think that's the end of the blueprint. And so we can now see the blueprint and how meaningful it is. And it's not just to you, right? It's all of us who are living in this society in one way or another. Even me here in Peru, I still have to deal with the same basic responsibilities in life. I still have to bridge that essence of life within me, that original innocence, to the daily functioning and be true to myself while still maintaining integrity and working through life. And I think that it's not just me and you.
No.
And this is something that comes through as a blueprint of humanity. And in that way, it's very meaningful and very essential. And especially when each one of us starts to recognize how relevant it is within our own dynamics. Yeah, each one of us may have different ways how those messages come through and the symbols that they come through with. But underneath that, it's the same essence of life. The same qualities, the same creative potential that can either be distorted and utilized for deception, or brought to essence and utilized to bring unconditional nurturing love into all of those places that are so hard to reconcile. Especially we live in this scarcity reality. And then dealing with some hurts, traumas, pains, and then not trusting this unconditional essence of the heart, not believing that there is something unconditional in this world. And actually, in this world, the only place where there is something unconditional is within the heart. And this is something that we can support each other in discovering.
It's incredible. It was amazing. It was amazing even listening to you read what I was obviously thinking about and experiencing in my dreams. I could feel that this was not just something that I'm going through or something that is unique to me. It's something that's like we're dreaming the collective dream, you know, like you said before in the past. It's a response to the culture that we're in, and you know, if we're all connected, then my dreams are not just mine.
Absolutely.
And yeah.
And at the same time with that, it's up to you to really apply that into your life, and no one else can do it for you. And then if each one of us responds to that call of the soul, then the world will be a better place.
So people who are watching this, they're probably wondering how they could at some point experience some of this up in person. And I know that you have some dates that you're going to be in the United States, and I was just wondering if you wanted to share some of what you have coming up and the workshops that you're doing and the opportunities that people might have to come in and see you and in person and just kind of experience this for themselves a little bit.
Well, in about 1 week and a half or so, we are departing on the tour as part of the Paititi Institute's traveling, teaching tour. And we will be in different places in the US. We'll be in New York and Massachusetts and Chicago and Colorado, I believe maybe Oregon. I'm not so good with the scheduling. My wife Cynthia, she's the one who works with that more deeply. But I was wondering that maybe you can share some of the schedule that we're going to have and the link to the site of the Paititi Institute.
I think that so I have a feeling that people are going to be writing in after this and wanting to know how they can reach out to you guys. So so we will stay tuned for just an email that we'll send to you along with the replay link to watch this again, because this is something that obviously it's long. This work takes a while to get into and to really kind of touch upon the bits of the journey that take some time to unfold. So it's a 3 hour and 30 minutes is where we're at right now. So the replay link will be available after after you watch this. And also in there, we'll give you some information on how to reach the Paititi Institute and get a hold of that schedule of their upcoming events. Roman and Cynthia have a beautiful, beautiful website with all kinds of amazing content, a blog that has just powerful articles on how you can bring some of this into your life. But yeah, so that would be a great way for them to find out more about what you have coming up, and to, you know, if they feel so called to come and work with you and experience this in person.
Very much so. And particularly the form and formless retreat is where we introduce the dream work in greater detail and share it with people in a way that people can continue to learn it and cultivate it within their lives. One useful tip that I can share about the dream work is that, as we have seen, the dream work brings through the underlying essence and dynamics of one's energy, of feelings and emotions and states of being. And another way is that the messages that are coming through dreams are never judging. It's never about you're doing something bad or you're doing something good, but it's about the lessons and the wisdom within everything that is taking place in our lives that allows the evolution to take place.
I love that. Yeah, because there is a tendency to, you know, be hard on yourself when you're like, oh man, I'm still learning that one again. I thought I'd figured that one out. I'm still on that one.
Mm-hmm.
But there is something beautiful about the idea of no judgment and self-forgiveness, and just kind of, you know, seeing without attaching an emotion, witnessing without attaching an emotion to what you're witnessing, to what you're.
Yeah, seeing the bird's eye view, and then as we've seen, it's essential to get lost in order to be found. And then, yeah, each one of us has certain things that we are ashamed of in ourselves and are afraid to tell others, which is why I truly honor you for being brave and coming out in front of thousands of people and really sharing your innermost inhibitions and challenges and difficulties. Because, yeah, it takes that bravery, and at the same time doing that can also feel very freeing and liberating.
Yeah.
Because through that, it's possible to recognize how related we all are, and how each one of us is experiencing those dynamics in our own personal way, but how those dynamics are universal. And then actually, by not hiding that, we can support each other and relate to each other on a much deeper level.
Yeah, well, I think that I relate to that. The second piece of that, especially, something about just letting it be out, letting people witness what I'm working with. It's something that I think for me is therapeutic, because of, like, I think you saw in some of the dreams that you were interpreting, I have this tendency to like hold. I hold it. I don't want it to be, you know, I don't want that to be out. I don't want the word. I don't want, you know. So it's almost like for me on a personal level, it's a medicinal practice just to let it out, you know, and to let people see, and then realize that the world is still there once everyone knows about things.
Yeah, this relates to the balance between the masculine and feminine that I talked in the beginning, that the real balance is to be brave in being vulnerable. That's the masculine supporting the feminine. Mm-hmm. And so now, as you've seen through this process, it's not just one cat that is out of the bag. It's 50 cats. Thank you, brother. Well, much love to you. Thank you so much.
I hope that everybody who was watching this got what they needed from the experience. And yeah, it's just an honor as always working with you, brother, and just journeying together.
Yeah, much love, and may the whole world be at peace.
Amen to that.